Thank you. Nobody cares about children's books unless they're the parent of small children or the grandparent of small children. Only those who have to read aloud at bedtime, night after night, often the same books over and over again, have strong feelings about this. And we don't want the Mr. Men, we don't want Thomas the Tank Engine, in my view. Kaye Webb knew this. They had to be books that would amuse the adult. She was a heroine to anyone in the 60s and 70s when she ran Puffin Books. She was certainly a heroine to me. She produced books like, and now I can click my first picture, Charlotte's Web, and everybody loves Charlotte's Web, and her own favourite, which was one that she discovered, click, Stig of the Dump. That's Edward Ardisoni's illustration as well. Stig of the Dump by Clive King. She discovered it on a slush pile. Anyway, she was absolutely brilliant and revered by everyone. She died in 1996, and by the time Penguin wanted a life of Kaye Webb, which was, they asked 2 years ago, in order to get the book out for Puffin's 70th anniversary this year, I was out of that loop completely. My children were grown up. I'd had 4 children during the 80s when I knew Kaye, and this is when she was involved in our lives. But the children had grown up. I stored away all the Puffins in the cellar, waiting for the grandchildren, which hadn't yet materialized. And all in all, I'd become the sort of person who, like any sane person, if they see a small child in a railway carriage, they get out of it. But I signed to do Kaye Webb. I said yes. Now, why? Because I knew about the love story. Now, sometimes people think that biographers spend too much time dwelling on the love story at the expense of the work. And perhaps it's true. But where would a life be without the love element? I mean, I couldn't have written about Laurie Lee without Lorna Wishart, the element of Lorna, the glamorous femme fatale, who wafted into Laurie's life, bore his love child, and then ditched him for Lucian Freud, whereupon poor, heartbroken Laurie married one of her nieces, faute de mieux, and in the meantime, Lorna ditched Lucian Freud, and he too married one of her nieces in 1950, first of his 6 wives. I couldn't have written about John Mortimer without the equally glamorous Mrs. Diamond, Penelope Diamond. Penelope Mortimer, as we know her, the novelist, who arrived in John's life when she was 30. She had 4 daughters by 3 different men, and John was 24. But she wrote better than he did about their life together, about everything really. And I really couldn't have got on without her and her diaries. So I signed to do Kaye Webb because I knew I would have to meet Ronald Searle. Kaye was a journalist who was working on, there she is, working on Lilliput. There she was in about 1940, and she was there from 1935. Do you remember Lilliput? No, you don't, you're far too young. It's true. It was a 6-penny magazine, pocket-sized. Oh, it's gone up to 7pence, I see. And all the people in the forces loved it, and it was full of very good cartoons and articles and photographs. One day in 1940, a young soldier called Ronald Searle sent in 3 cartoons from where he was stationed in Scotland about wicked schoolgirls. And he'd actually met 2 of these girls in Kirkcudbright, and they were from an academy in Edinburgh called St. Trinian's. And here's one of the first 3 cartoons ever. Oh, the caption is missing. Hand up the girl who burnt down the East Wing last night. well, everybody at Lilliput loved these cartoons, and they hoped for more. But they heard nothing, and when they inquired, they heard that Ronald Searle was missing, presumed dead. What in fact had happened is that he'd sailed off with his regiment to destination unknown, which proved to be Singapore, arriving on the morning it fell in 1941. And so he was taken captive by the Japanese and sent off to the Burma-Siam Railway, the railway of death, where for the next 4 years in the jungle, he was beaten, tortured, and starved, suffering from beriberi, dysentery, and malaria several times. And most of his friends died. But in 1945, Kaye Webb was reading a newspaper, Reynolds News, doesn't exist anymore, where she read that Ronald Searle and all the others were released from Changi jail and would be home soon. She felt strangely elated. She'd never met him, but she loved his cartoons and she loved his handwriting, very important. And well, he did get back, and he brought with him. He weighed less than 7 stone. He was so starved and like a skeleton. And he brought with him 300 drawings from Changi. These are just 2 of them. I just picked them at random because there's a Japanese guard, obviously, but the way they show the skeletal men and the way they were treated. He managed to secrete these drawings on scraps of paper under the bodies of those suffering from cholera because he knew the guards wouldn't go near them. Anyway, he got them home, and he arrived himself noble and sweet. Oh dear, I've got that. That's don't look at that yet. He was so sweet and charming and noble and handsome, and he wooed Kaye by writing letters to her. He knew she could help him because she knew everyone. And this was how he illustrated one of his little letters. Did you ever run round like this, looking hearty? Hurrah for St. Trinians. And it was really a sort of form of courtship, these letters he wrote to her, and she was charmed. And they duly fell in love when they met, and within a year, her husband, the RAF wing commander, was divorcing her. Well, she was pregnant with Ronald Searle's twins, who were born in 1947. There they are, John and Katie. Now, they married in 1948, and in the 1950s, Ronald Searle and Kaye Webb were the glamour couple of London. They lived, of course, not far from here. They didn't call it Notting Hill. It was Bayswater. They lived in Newton Road, and you can see their amazing house. I mean, you remember well, you don't. I do. The 50s. 50s were a decade of Heinz salad cream on the table and utility furniture. Their house was the last word in modern design. I haven't got a photograph of it, but you can all walk round there, round the corner, and have a look at it. It's the only concrete house in the road of Victorian houses, right opposite where Paul Johnson lives, actually, which he thinks it's a horrid house. But of course, it is amazing. It was built by Denys Lasdun in 1939 for 2 artists. It's got a huge studio on top. And Ronald painted all the walls with murals, and it was just the last word. I mean, everyone thought it was an astonishing house. And it was a great venue for parties, and everyone came to their parties. People like Joyce Grenfell and Michael Flanders and Alec Guinness and Peter Ustinov. Everyone came to their parties. And of course, they were so successful. Ronald was the most in-demand cartoonist in the land. And Kaye, well, she was writing articles, and he illustrated them. She was editing the Young Elizabethan magazine, very highbrow magazine, numbered Alan Ayckbourn and Nigel Rees, quote unquote, among its readers. And also, it's where Molesworth first appeared, where most of us first noticed Ronald Searle's work, the Molesworth drawings. And then she had a television program called Kaye Webb's Scrapbook, and she had a diary in Woman's Hour called Kaye Webb's Diary every month. Now, women columnists are 10 a penny now. They were much rarer then, although Geoffrey Archer's mother, Lola, did have a column in the Western-super-Mare Journal called Across the Teacups, where she used to write about the antics of her mischievous little boy, Geoffrey, known as Tuppence. Kaye also used to end each diary with an anecdote about her children. One day, Katie went to see her grandparents in Cambridge, and she was getting the train back. So Ronald said, "Why don't you write down the names of all the stations you passed through on the way?" So she did. She wrote down Cambridge, Audley End, Bishop Stortford, Gentleman, Liverpool Street. That kind of sweet thing. But what Kaye mostly did was to write about her glamorous life. She dropped names, she hurled the names at her listeners, and she also, there was an air of smugness about it. She described a charmed life. She wrote once about her birthday and how Ronald's present was so beautifully wrapped that she didn't like to open it for several days, and how her bath salts were called Heart of a Rose. Well, it's just a little on the smug side. However, the point is that they were happy. They were happy for a decade. There they are. There's Ronald, the twins, and Kaye, the happy Searle family. And writing about your happiness in marriage is a hostage to fortune, and their happiness came to a brutal and sudden end one day because Ronald Searle vanished. He simply vanished one weekend in October '61. He just flew away to Paris while Kaye was away in their cottage with the children. They were 14 at the time, and I'm afraid it was absolutely shattering. He'd gone to the arms of Monica, a beautiful theatre designer he'd met, and everyone was absolutely polax. I mean, Punch had lost its cover artist and its principal caricaturist, and that wasn't Belle, was it? No. Okay. And she had lost everything. She was completely shattered. But the marvelous thing about this story is that she bounced back. She just, she was like a cork that bobbed up. She just got a new job, as it happened, at Puffin Books, editing them. Everyone thought this was very strange because she was a journalist. She'd never been anything to do with publishing. She'd hardly read any children's books, but she learnt very fast. I mean, she flung herself into it, and it was a golden age, anyway, of children's books coming out. There were, Alan Garner, Philippa Pierce, all these marvellous writers for children pouring books out and snapped up by Puffin. And booksellers started putting whole areas of their shops for children's books and paperbacks, too. They weren't snooty about them anymore. Ian Norrie, in the High Hill bookshop in Hampstead, used to say, there's not a child in Hampstead who isn't gifted. I know because their parents tell me so. And Kaye invented a little jingle for bookshops. There is nothing like a puffin. It went, I'm sure you can all see it. And the following year, 1967, she invented the Puffin Post. Now, sorry, the Puffin Club and Puffin Post. Aha, right. The Puffin Club was her stroke of absolute genius. Every intelligent child in the land joined the Puffin Club. Anyone aged 40 who's now in television, newspapers, advertising, etc., was a Puffin Club member. There was a badge. There was a wonderful magazine called the Puffin Post. There it is, very distinctive. And inside, she put all the clever little drawings, stories, and poems that everybody wrote. I was once leafing through the Puffin Post with Kaye, and I said, is that Emma Thompson, aged 12? Is that the Emma Thompson? And she said, of course it's the Emma Thompson. And of course, all her friends sent their children along to join the Puffin Club. They had holidays, they had an exhibition every year. They met all their favourite authors, Roald Dahl, Quentin Blake, Noel Stretfield. It was just a most marvellous thing that she did, because she brought adventure and fun into children's lives. My own daughter went on a trip to Roald Dahl's house, and he showed them the BFG's sandals, which were his own sandals, and he gave every child a jiffy bag full of chocolate, Mars bars, M&Ms, Maltesers, etc. Well, that was great. I could have filled a whole book with Puffin stories, Puffineers' old memories of their wonderful times in the Puffin Club. But I still had to get to Ronald Searle, so I'll just end by saying that I did. I was told you never will, because he's such a hermit. He lives on a mountainside in the south of France. He never answers the telephone. He hates being reminded of his first marriage, and he doesn't even speak to his children. Well, with trepidation, I wrote to him, and I just pass over the next picture, which is Kaye having fun with a Puffin Club adventure. Here, my heart leaps up still when I behold his writing on the envelope, still spidery, and just as it ever was. I went to see him on his 90th birthday this year. There he is drinking his Bilka Salmon champagne, which is his engine fuel. He's still with Monica. He's still at his drawing board. He's utterly as adorable in every way and charming as he was when Kaye met him. And this is my birthday card from Ronald Searle this year, which I shall frame. Now, do I feel guilty that I befriended this man who left Kaye and her children in the lurch 50 years ago? Well, yes, I do. But I did say that you can't write a biography without some romantic element and personal element and involvement. And I still honour Kaye because in the last 2 years, while writing the book, I acquired 2 grandchildren, so I shall be reading all those brilliant Puffin books all over again. Thank you.